Good morning. Since I was doubting how to speak in this conference in Lithuanian or in English, but since I've always had complaints from people from abroad that they couldn't understand my presentation through translation, I decided this time to read it in English because it's an international conference and we have an international audience. And of course, Lithuanians who will not be able to understand it will have a chance to read it sometime because this topic is part of a book I'm writing about the experience of time in contemporary art. Well, I got interested in time, so might be speaking like experiencing time a bit. Usually presentations here show lots of works of art. My presentation is different in this sense because I will show only two and discuss them in depth. So, this paper was initially provoked by the exhibition Women's Time, Sculpture and Cinema, curated by Laima Kreivytė and Elona Lubitė in 2002 at the National Gallery of Art. It exposed the contradictory situation when Soviet system declared gender equality and art used women's figures to reiterate the patriarchal order. Its starting point was Julia Kristeva's essay Women's Time, in which the waves of feminist movement are linked to the models of linear, cyclical, and monumental time. The woman, according to Laima Kreivytė, worked in the exhibition like a stopwatch, allowing to measure women's place in history. I quote Kreivytė, "For women, according to Jacques Lacan, does not exist. She is man's other, a negative, an empty shell, and visionary artists fill her with a meaning that is important to them. This is why so few actual women are portrayed. Usually they stand for metaphors for life, symbols of motherhood, allegories of the nation, objects of beauty, working class people, etc." End of quote. The exhibition revealed the place of women as models in the history of Lithuanian Soviet art, but the time of the woman as creator remained invisible. Now the situation has changed. There are many women artists, and it is time to discuss women's time. In her story of time models, Kristeva mentions the creator 3 times. First, when she speaks about pregnancy or reproduction as the function of cyclical time, which is opposite to the production of historical time. She points to the creator again when she speaks of the second generation of feminists who no longer focus on the special powers of women and rethink linear time. The third wave of feminists explores fluid identity, refusing even to define the woman. Such an identity presupposes that all time models coexist in the same historical time. Kristeva suggests including the split characteristic to symbolical order into every subject as a process, the basis of self-creation. I shall discuss 2 photo installations by these 2 young women artists, She or Is by Akvilė and Anglickaitė, and Playing with Science by Dalia Mikonytė. Here is the first one, She or Is. It consists of seemingly unrelated photographs exhibited so as to avoid forming a line or a clear shape, as well as the linear time of narrative. The visitor's eye is attracted first by 2 photographs of women with dogs on the back wall, past the swarm of other images on the side wall. The brightest and the largest photograph shows a young, beautiful blonde woman wearing a pink dress and a red mantle. A Siberian husky looks at her with lust or piety. The second photograph is smaller and features an older but also blonde woman dressed in black and holding a mongrel dog. Both women stand in an empty blue garage built from silicon bricks. The portraits remind of religious icons, which is why some critics have attributed the images to patriarchal tradition of depicting women as empty shells to be filled with meanings, enumerated here by Lina Michelkevičė. I will quote her. These carefully designed non-fulfilled portraits of Madonnas can reveal to any viewer with at least some education in the Western art history the traditional elements of Mariological art. The blue color treated in Christianity as exclusively the color of Virgin Mary, the classical posture of her mother and baby in the first photo, the red cloak of the younger woman representing the presence of God, the black clothes of the other one, typical for the tradition of depicting Pieta. On the other hand, while for the older woman the dog replaces a baby, the younger's relation to her Siberian husky looks more like a discrete passion, or the story of the Little Red Riding Hood and the wolf. Both of these women types correspond to the two basic images of the woman in Western art, painting, photography, and cinema. One of them is an attentive and humble mother, the Madonna, whose devotion doesn't have to be aimed just at the baby. The second is a wicked one, also devoted, but on the basis of her passion, the Mary Magdalene type. Akvilė Anglickaitė does not struggle against this male tradition of painting, and even though her first Madonna is a little bit aged and infertile, she performs her function of care and devotion quite efficiently. End of quote. The critic discusses the portraits reading them from left to right, but the artist has reversed the usual order by emphasizing the portrait on the right, which is significant, as we shall see. Also, some questions remain unanswered. Why does the artist photograph dogs with the women? Why does the Madonna wear the clothes of Pieta and the sinful girl, the red cloak attributed to deities? Why the artist photographs them in the small blue garage? And finally, why is the floor under the beauty's feet wet? This dictionary of symbols offers some help. The dogs are ambiguous creatures that could mean both fidelity and death. In medieval art, a white dog symbolized piety, while the black one, jealousy. Jealousy is not the feeling we usually attribute to a Madonna or a Pieta, and piety is usually not the attribute of a sexy beauty. On the other hand, the adoring lover dog could be seen as a werewolf, and the dog baby as a degenerate, a symbol of anxiety experienced by pregnant women. The black color reminds of Satanist narratives about the babies of devils. The red is also full of ambiguities. It is the sign of love, passion, and fecundity, and also of death, blood, and fires of hell, sin, also of Christ's mercy. The same could be said of the black color. Its presence reminds us not only of Satan, sin, and death, but also of submissiveness, humility, and self-relinquishment. The blue is simpler. It is the color of heaven's purity, deity, truth, stability, and fidelity. Usually the context helps to identify the meaning of color. What does the arrangement of the blue, the red, and the black tell us in this ensemble of two women with dogs? Let us look at the women again. If the young woman radiates heavenly beauty, another critic, Monika Krikštopaitytė, called the older one as an earthly woman, like a neighbor. But they both stand in the same garage, suggesting that we might be seeing the same woman at different moments of her life. Woman's time becomes the theme of this installation, the time of the same woman who is adored, desired, and enveloped with heavenly visions at the beginning of her mature life, and after having performed her reproductive function, she remains an almost invisible carer. The blue space looks like an abstract background, but it is also a prison cell, a cellar or a toilet, not a cozy home or a landscape where we usually see painted Madonnas. Anglickaitė's women stand in the space of banishment. The wet floor under the beauty's feet may be an expression of sexual intercourse or birth. Yet this space with bad connotations is painted blue, the only unambiguously positive color of heavens. Why? In Christian iconography, the mantle of Virgin Mary is traditionally blue and marks her as the Queen of Heavens, her body as the Church. The bodies of women in Anglickaitė's photographs point to contradictory meanings and only perform the Christian roles of Mary and Mary Magdalene imposed on them by the patriarchal culture. Anglickaitė demonstrates the Christian narrative as torn by contradictions and ignoring the experiences of real women. The woman enduring in the interval of time between these two portraits is not an empty shell for the artist, but a complex subject. Both the similarity and incompatibility of the images with the usual Christian iconography are linked to motherhood, which is always subject to regulation by the state. This is why Krikštopaitytė wanted to reject this topic in her discussion of Anglickaitė's photo installation. I quote her. Neither the artist nor I want to say that this work is about motherhood, because Soviet art suffered from multiple motherhoods in the titles of paintings that did not fit the correct themes. The same period is also marked by a huge public conflict between the idealization of motherhood and her real isolation. Nowadays, motherhood is a concept used by various parties and priests who have promised to follow celibate and is dragged around, especially before elections, but loses sanctity as soon as they start cutting the budget and is remembered again when women dare to want some rights, but they are not considered family when they are alone with their children. Actually, just now, a similar law has been passed again that a woman with a child without a man is not a family in Lithuania. Social and political uses of motherhood make this theme unpalatable in art, but is important to Anglickaitė, who was then expecting her baby. According to Kristeva, it is the time when the issue of women's identity becomes particularly charged, as that period is, I quote, experienced as the radical ordeal of the splitting of the subject, redoubling of the body, separation and coexistence of the self and of the other, of nature and consciousness, of physiology and speech. This fundamental challenge to identity is then accompanied by a fantasy of totality, narcissistic completeness, a sort of instituted, socialized, natural psychosis, end of quote. We can recognize the split in Anglickaitė's photo installation where the woman's identity oscillates between sexuality, sin, danger, care, death, submission, and fidelity. It is enveloped by the Virgin Mary's color, a kind of fantasy of totality, but also as institutionalized psychosis. Kristeva calls this contradictory experience of motherhood as a, quote, criterion in the strict sense of the world, and a bridge towards the monumental time, opening the gate to the relativity of existence. Anglickaitė's Madonna, enduring in time but changing, is a creator of Kristeva's new generation, rethinking the time of history, not as made of linear causal chains, but of superimposed and contradictory durations. It is time to consider the other photographs in the installation, which accompany the viewer approaching the two portraits of women. They form four groups. First, we see three photographs of seemingly the same hilly landscape, as if passed by a car. The bushes and the ridge of the hills is the same, but also changing. The blurring and the disappearing, reappearing sun create an illusion of movement. The second group are three photographs of foliage captured from inside while sitting in the bushes in darkness. The third group consists of four interiors: the statue of the Christ, people sitting around a table in a cafe, 6 narrow Gothic windows, and a crowd of people. The fourth group consists of a single photograph which does not fit anywhere. It represents a coffin-shaped monument near the forest split by two paths. Lina Michelkevičė thinks that the religious references overshadow the topic of her, even though the white dead nettle glimpsing in the fragment of a forest are the flowers used for treating gynecological diseases. But an important actor here is light, and the twilight of the exhibition space, which, according to Krikštopaitytė, creates the atmosphere of uncertainty and sensations which are difficult to articulate, the waiting for something unknown while exploring one's experiences. End of quote. Thus, she reads the group of the photographs on the side wall as the wandering of a relaxed gaze, also characteristic to babies. And I quote again, "The gaze floats somewhere inside, reaching to the outside only sometimes. The impalpable message or the sharing of that impalpable acquires some features gradually. Having put together the calculated keywords one by one, we would get something like this. A woman is waiting and observing what is happening inside, and then a new human being appears inside her with its own inside." End of quote. The photographs create this impression because everything in them is moving. The spaces and situations remain unexplained. It is impossible to say where the light comes from, whether the sun rises or sets, why these people have gathered and to whom the monument is dedicated. At the same time, all this creates a sense of indifference towards the outside, especially because the photographed situations do not connect into a continuous narrative. We can only discern passive actions, usually related to waiting for an event and indicating inner time. Its form is not simple. It represents the cycle of reproduction, ensuring the continuation of humanity, where the woman is only an intermediary, but the installation stretches it out into an interval of time belonging to a single woman, weaving together the threads of the birth of Christ, death, resurrection, journey, waiting, and memory. The meaning of this interval could be understood if we relate the title of the photo installation, She or Is, and its an introductory text to Kristeva's Women's Time. I quote Akvilė Anglickaitė. "Fragments from her being, those that did not happen, existed, are continuing until or without the creation of the new other. The state of the unknown caused by," end of quote. "The state of the unknown caused by the inner split of woman is experienced by the choppy string of words and the logical split in the title. Having read she, we expect he. Is found instead cracks a contradiction, meanwhile becoming a hint at the silence word, marking the opposite to existence, which takes the place of woman in this disjunction. When we can read the title also as either woman or being, as woman's separation from being. On the other hand, she, written in capital letters, reminds of Lacan's statement I mentioned at the beginning, there is no such thing as woman. For Lacan, there is no such thing as woman from the capital letter, that is, a being who possesses a mythical unity. As we have seen, Anglickaitė's installation denies any possibility of non-contradictory unity by revealing woman's time as constant becoming. By experiencing pregnancy, reflecting on motherhood, she questions identities imposed by others, listens to the split happening inside her body and consciousness. So this installation visualizes time. The desire to see time is paradoxical, as Kant has said. Objective time does not exist. Time is nothing else but the form of our inner feeling. That is when we observe our inner state, he says. It helps us to create the image of our identity despite all differences and splits in time and the constantly changing reality. To see the physically non-existing time would be the same as to see ourself, consciousness or soul, if we speak in Kant's terms. Lithuanian philosopher Kristupas Sabolius claims that we can see time in our imagination, which completes the data and the senses and visualizes thoughts. The images created by imagination is time expressed in spatial terms. I quote, "The intuition of time does not give itself otherwise than in external spatial configurations. Time always hides behind space. Thus, when we close our eyes and try to distance ourselves from it, the figurativeness does not stop persecuting us. This is what imagination is, the pure flow that has melted in transobjective simulacra." We can understand the photographs of Anglickaitė, their melting and hiding, as partial expressions of temporal intuition. She stops the images of intermediary states, thus withholding the resolution, so that the moment of time captured in her photographs would remain at the point of transformation. Then the photographs show the present as defined by Sabolius. The pretension of images is our expectation of metamorphosis. The retention of images is the withholding of metamorphosis. The present is pure metamorphosis, the change, only change. In this sense, the photographs displayed on the side wall in Anglickaitė's installation, except the monument to death, the metamorphosis that has already happened, have been constructed in order to cut the flow of time into any direction, and their constellation would make only the total whole of monuments, which we can understand only as an unchanging now, as an inner gaze floating in the present, while the expected metamorphosis has not yet happened. This radical indeterminacy stops the linear time of history. The present that does not envision the past or the future is endless, like the sky, the foliage, and the light in the images of this installation. This present no longer knows its own cause and continuation. The time of this work is not the time of history, but of the image that refuses to participate in histories. When the links of meaning are broken, we look and don't even imagine what will happen next. Yet this time is neither stopped nor continuous. The photographs, as I have said, form groups in which not only objects, but also rhythms are different. It is possible to hear the combination of rhythms as musical composition. The journey through the landscape is an extended monotonous chord of low and high sounds, interrupted irregularly by the dark spot of the tree, the flashes of the sun, the moving clouds. The standing in the bushes and intimate interiors is a chaotic rustle of low sounds, crossed by the splashes of light and the rhetorical gesture of the Christ. The interiors where people have gathered consist of the sounds of concrete music, the poured coffee, the chatting, the tapping of feet. In the photographs of the monument and church interiors, the shining and dark verticals and the horizontals cutting across them create a structure of orderly beats and registers. The seemingly scattered images form four rhythmical parts. It's like a visual quartet of different instruments, which perform the vertical temporality mentioned in Gaston Bachelard's The Dialectique de la Durée, the dialectic of the durée. Thus, we may conclude that the system of scattered photographs in Anglickaitė's photo installation She or Is resonates with the main theme of woman's time by relating it to cosmic movements, durations, rhythms, and frequencies, and disconnect the fiction conveys bodily vibrations during a certain moment of pregnancy and expectation. But that does not mean only exploring the experiences of the changing body in which another body is forming. This is a visualization of the vertical temporality of being in the world. In other words, the rhythm analysis of the photographs tells us to cross the word "or" in the title. On the other hand, the photographs representing existential rhythms and the icons representing women's roles have been separated by exhibiting them on different walls. Thus, we have either her or being. On the other hand, both notions are connected not only by space, but also by the colors repeating on both walls and meanings of cultural signs. Thus, we have both her and being, which is expressed here as the monumental time of listening to cosmic vibrations. Now the next work by Dalia Mikonytė, whose exhibition you saw yesterday. I called it The Time of Growing, while the first one was The Time of Nurturing. If woman's time is the center of Anglickaitė's installation, Mikonytė deconstructs both femininity and the duration of identity in time as impossible. The action of playing with signs takes place on a wall, which is a pinkish-gray tabula rasa. She can attach anything to it and take it off as easily because post-it notes stay there only temporarily and do not leave any traces. It is easy to connect things and construct, then to laugh at the work of chance. When she presented the series, Mikonytė related the photographed wall with the creator's identity. I quote her. A harmonious, unified, and exceptional narrative of personal identity is only an ideal literary project. Any attempt to represent identity could rather be understood as a certain performance, simulation, and play with language. It's science. Identity is not only what we have been given in advance, but also what we achieve by connecting various events of our lives and circumstances into a narrative. Identity is the ability of every person to balance between constructing consciousness and chance. Although it is impossible to draw a seamless portrait of the creator of the 21st century, it is possible to put references, that is, to draw a dotted line, end of quote. Thus, the wall represents a hypothetical personality. At the same time, it is like a mirror that does not show the true face, only the mask and identity as a performance. The performance of femininity in this case, but subtly unraveled by adhering to the notion of performative identity and putting a photo of Judith Butler also on the wall. Yet Mikonytė emphasizes not switching roles, not the realization of gender practices, but the manifestations of identity through language and visual signs, which are freely taken from all culture, all times, to create identity as a story about herself. The signs not so much point to the creator's characteristics as to texts from which her identity is compiled. The personality is an accumulation of personal, collective, familiar and unfamiliar experiences. Such a structure of identity is unstable. One can reconstruct it by interchanging signs and their places. How is the time of a woman of this new generation constructed? The series consists of 7 photographs which vary sizes and make up a sort of wave. Thus, the figure formed from the photographs denies linear narrative and should be seen as a picture where our gaze may move in all directions, constantly returning to the same objects and giving a new meaning to them. But the number of the photographs could be interpreted as the number of the days in the week, where we would see the usual interval of time, a segment of life, which can be repeated endlessly to create a series. The philosopher Peter Osborne relates the series as the main principle of conceptual art to the condition of the modern, broken and fragmentary subject. The series, as an assemblage of fragments of an invisible whole, expresses that state and compensates for its incompleteness, because it suggests the state of unity, which is always becoming and is potentially infinite. But the series is always only a fragment, whose infinite continuity and process is guaranteed by the nature of elements making it up. These are not the sentences or symbols creating the never-exhaustible meaning, but information units, which are self-understandable. Moreover, the series is always self-ironic, to quote Osborne. The rationality of any series is compromised by the arbitrariness of its beginning, its rule, and, if it is in principle infinite, the point at which its pursuit is terminated. From what information units does the series consist? In the first photograph, called Appropriation Again, we see a cup with an onion and a photograph of a woman with a naked breast, which is actually an onion. A hand in front holds something invisible. In the second, called References, we see a socket and a shelf with an onion on it, 2 kinds of pasta, 4 different paper bags, a bottle of sunflower oil, and 52 yellow post-it notes with statements about identity and gender. The third photograph, Diversity, contains only 10 heart-shaped post-it notes with swear words, which mostly point to sexual organs and sexual relationships. The fourth one, library, shows a shelf with 22 books on gender studies, philosophy and art, and a color photograph from Soviet times, a blonde girl, Dalia, probably herself, with a white overall standing by the Christmas tree. In the fifth one, called The Same Troubles, we see two photographs with captions, Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari, at Internet, Paulius Vaškas and Dalia Mikonytė at Soulbox opening. The sixth, called Bad Influence, features 19 portraits of famous people, 14 women and 5 men, and a statement, women who had influence on me. The seventh photo, we can do it. In it we see 5 cactus trunks and a photograph representing 2 sculptures, a woman as if looking through the window and a man gesturing towards it. In her review of Playing with Science, another artist, Aurelia Mikonytė, observes that this wall could be anywhere, even at her own home. Women's movements cut out of everyday environment and turned into postcards create science, which we can decode in any way we like. To touch a bag of pasta, to pluck a leaf of spring onion, to water the cactus, to turn the pages of a book on banking or feminist theory. All these are daily rituals which we have to perform to create science, mostly invisible, closed or hidden between walls, and sometimes published, exposed or presented to the viewer's eye. Such signs may appear anywhere, but if we decode them in any way, the conceptual structure of the installation gets lost. When we carefully select the meanings, we shall see that these watercolor-like photographs form a text about a woman's becoming, the time of growing. This metaphor was suggested by the emphasis on plants in the first and in the last photographs. The first impression is like a seed, because identity of the future plant looks automatically recognized. Oh. Yes, here. Recognized and confirming that this is a woman's space. The pink color, the products, the plants referring to woman as nature, the dominating title of Simone de Beauvoir's book, Le Deuxième Sexe, but if we look closer, we see non-feminine words on pink hearts. Other titles, the Dictionary of Philosophy or academic catalog, could suggest traditional masculinity, as well the phallic form of the plants, the simplicity of products, and the sterile, anti-natural order. Thus, the same things generate the seeds of doubt over all references to gender. The creator acting in this space creates herself by incorrectly misappropriating the signs of both sexes and disturbing familiarity. This transformation starts already in the first image, appropriation again, which is even nauseatingly feminine. The plant in a cup and the softly pink photograph on the wall. Yet the photograph complicates everything. This is a work by another artist, Beatrice Vanagaitė, appropriated by Dalia, which in itself is an appropriation of Yuri Nagashima's photograph The Onion, with a hand holding the imaginary plant added. The usual gesture in the iconography of Madonna transfers the usual plant, the onion, into the painting, and it turns into a breast. Its pink end convincingly invites the baby or a man to suckle this promise of happiness. In traditional paintings, the plant held by Mary symbolically represents the breast, which is really so obviously presented to its consumer. Like an innocent toy, it tempts Jesus to know the world. What will happen when he will suckle the onion? Tears over the man-unfriendly world. Thus, this image marks the process of growing with separation, unsatisfied expectations, and the impossibility to appropriate the other. This breast, so tempting, is a deception, very much like the painting itself. The chest on which the onion becomes a breast, so realistically, is flat. The flatness is concealed by the pink drapery, which has suggested femininity so far. But if this chest is flat, then this is not a drapery, but a pink top on a man's body. a homosexual sign perhaps. Through all these deceptions, the artist reminds us of the arbitrariness of such things, signs, like the light falling on the table and on the cup, which is culturally charged, but is also just a physical phenomenon. Thus, the subject repudiated by the onion breast is returned to everyday reality, where things are simply useful utensils and not fetishes or objects of desire. The onion appears as such a tamed domestic object in the second photograph, references. Its meaning changes into the simplest vegetable, forming the basis of meals, no longer nature, but an industrial product, like the references to unnamed texts point to the products of intellectual production, which must be appropriated while growing up. But if we read the references, we can see that they express doubt over identity as the core of the subject lasting in time, because the subject is defined as having lost memory and roots, migrating, nomadic, hybrid, untrustworthy, unable to concentrate, making mistakes, not knowing whom to believe. The references mock at and question the premises of this installation and its interpretation. For instance, the lining of things is linked to autism. The phrase "to connect points" turns into an instruction to read the installation as a collection of data. But any attempt to connect them correctly and to find the true meaning is questioned by the words, "My eyes, I see what I want." It is really impossible to tidy up this conglomerate of post-it notes into a linear narrative or a systemic theory to explain reality, because any statement would be contradicted by another one, also found on this wall. The non-hierarchically arranged statements become visually uniform information units of a series, and the collection of books in the library is also a fragment is also a fragment of the great library of the world, also a segment of a series which accidentally happens to be here. Thus, the library and the installation of references are potentially endless, still continued. Their elements, like the things lined on the shelf, have been produced by others and mixed up to produce new narratives and theories, and the constantly changing self, made of fragments, misconceptions, doubts, contradictions, etc. The third stage of this growing up consists of two photographs hanging one above the other in the center of the installation. The hearts with swear words make the figure analogical to the whole installation, but placed vertically like a lit candle. It is like the phase of sexual maturity, biological and symbolical appropriation, which coincides with the protest against all given truths. The signs of protest are represented by the two photographs on the right, which look like eyes in the installation. They seem to be opposed to each other. In one, there sit middle-aged philosophers. In the other, we see a crowd of young people who, according to Mikonytė, are waiting for the words of the two theoreticians, the words which have been written long ago and become rules. Yet these photographs are related not only by words and the same format, but also by the theme of counterculture. The same troubles is dictated in the title. Tim Rainer, who has posted the photograph of the two philosophers, now appropriated by Mikonytė, says their texts were like a flight away from the parents' culture. I quote here. The driving impulse behind the counterculture was not just to oppose the status quo, it was to get free of it, to head for the horizon with bloodshot eyes on experimental lines of light. Lines of light are bolts of pent-up energy that break through the cracks in a system of control and shoot off on the diagonal. By the light of their passage, they reveal the open spaces beyond the limits of what exists. In a series of books written with a militant psychotherapist, Guattari, Deleuze linked human creativity to flight. It is our desire to escape the status quo that leads us to innovate. Like the prisoner, we dream of being anywhere but here, We coordinate, form alignments, combine our powers, and innovate. We remake the world on creative trajectories, end of quote. The counterculture is linked with creation, and the philosophers promote a migrating subject who would not stop at identities founded by authority figures, but would recreate them constantly. The new subject is, according to the philosophers, only a threshold, the door, the becoming between two multiplicities, and its task is to delete the signs written in it, like on paper or a canvas, to let the creative chaos in. When Mikonytė's playing with signs reaches this point, it becomes a canvas. All words and images pasted on it have to be brushed off together with the books by other authors, format tools for destroying previous certainties and references that caused the chaos of signs, statements, identities, interpretations, and thoughts. Thus, identity that still tried to delineate familiar and safe territories becomes a temporal trajectory that has nothing and preserves otherness as the sign of split, which never stops and cannot be caught. In yet another website, with the same photograph of Dalia and Guattari, we find a plant as metaphor of self-creation. I quote them. We are tired of the tree. We no longer have to believe neither in trees nor in roots or radicals. We have suffered enough from them. The entire culture of the branch tree stands on their basis, from biology to linguistics. On the contrary, only underground shoots or aerial roots, weeds and rhizomes are beautiful, loving and political. End of quote. The figure of the onion that has already sprouted its shoots acquires a new meaning of liberation from the dominated culture here. The second photograph from the opening of the bar Soul Box in Vilnius transfers this philosophical detachment from the status quo of to Mikonytė's life. Paulius Vaškas is a guitarist of the group Sheep Got Waxed, which plays avant-garde jazz mixed with rock and tries to reach the limits of imagination. Soul Box was established in the city as a place for nomadic subjects longing for a different time, which was promised in the website of the bar. Everyone who spends a day here or discovers night leaves a piece of themselves and thus becomes a part of Soul Box, end of quote. The bar fills the abandoned historical part of town with its own soul and good time. The identity of the place is constantly changing because it is recreated by a new music, exploring the limits of imagination and pieces of all those visitors' selves. Chaos prevails, and what is easily discovered is equally easily deleted. The temporal trajectory of light pierces the space, and the philosophical protest is planted into a commercial environment where it grows unexpected shoots. If we still continue, this photograph is followed by a swarm of portraits called Bad Influence. This is like a board of honor of icons, where art mixes with pop culture, philosophy with feminism, literature with cinema, real and imaginary personalities. I guess that from Sophie Kahl and Marina Abramovich, the artist learns to use her life in art and raise doubts. By creating documentary fictions like Vera Chytilova, she fights for her right to speak and develops irony. Like Dana Scully from X-Files, she is skeptic towards any mystical science. Like Patti Smith, Shirley Manson, Kim Gordon, Courtney Love, and Kurt Cobain, she opposes the dominating culture. Like Brian Molko, Tavid Gevinson, Judith Butler, Jacques Lacan, Luce Irigaray, Simone de Beauvoir, Hélène Cixous, and Julia Kristeva, she writes with her own body, appropriates the other, and constantly performs identity. And from Nietzsche's and Derrida's texts, she knows that there is no reliable authority left who not correct meaning and identity, freed from metaphysics, melts in the endless chain of deconstructions. This swarm of portraits contains both the theoretical basis of play with science and its methodical principle, its goal and process, its result and conclusion about women's time. When the work is created with regard to such personalities, the interpretation of signs used in it cannot stop, and the possible reader's text grows and branches. Yet the title Bad Influence crosses out what I have said here. Mikonytė uses the principle of Derrida's difference to open a temporal interval in each sign as an aporia of meaning, which never lets us reach the end of the interval. But she is also ironic towards her own method and feminist theory that has prompted her search for identity. Perhaps it is time to drop everything and look for the solution somewhere else. In the last photograph, we can do it. It closes the narrative symmetrically by combining the themes of growing, becoming, femininity and masculinity, opposition and mistake. The symmetry contradicts the anti-hierarchical order of signs and constant negation in its installation, which perhaps is also related to going elsewhere. The plant is no longer an onion, but a cactus, which Mikonytė has treated as a new species that has lost its biological innocence and has become a multiphallic cactus. Whether the cactus is phallic, like the breast-like onion, it cannot give pleasure due to its spiky nature, turning into a partner of vagina dentata, a kind of phallus dentatus. Both objects of sexual fantasy threaten with pain and castration. When teeth are pulled out of the vagina, the controlling woman mother is turned into a real woman who can be controlled. And what to do with a spiky multiphallic cactus? But vagina dentata is not a sexist hallucination, Camille Paglia warns. Every vagina reduces every penis like Mother Nature swallows humanity, both female and male. It is time again to wake up from psychoanalytical fantasies. The ambiguity of the cactus shows a solution next to it. The sculptures of woman and man were photographed at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, the true cradle of Western civilization. The sculptures stand quite far away from each other in the exposition, but here they are presented from such an angle that makes the woman look monumental and the man belittled. The traditional roles have switched. Differently from the first photograph, she is really a woman. The folds of her clothes look like the ridges of the cactus. She is a real work of art and not somebody's performance. But she is also not real, made of separate fragments, and the half-naked man breaks the window with his hand to open an exit from this closed space of privacy and traditional values to the light. The window gives us some hope. The light coming from some real but invisible window falls on the walls represented in all these photographs, thus connecting them into one. Now we can see that the light here is neither accidental nor passive. The abstract figures of light are also significant elements in these photographs. This is what they do. In the first photograph, light draws a horizontal line under the cup like a stable basis. In the middle segment, the triangle of light points to the hearts like a diagonal of flight. And in the next photograph, the growth and strengthened triangle of light draws a diagonal to the opposite direction and points to the cactus and the window. As we look, the fictional light seen through the photographed window acquires a physical quality. It as if creates the very photographs we see and moves across the wall. The edges of the photographs merge with the wall, their surroundings, and the post-it notes that let the texture of surfaces shine through look real and present in our space, together with all the women that have affected the artist. Their words are also alien words on the wall of our personality. We may conclude that this dematerialized wall also has been affected by the light coming through the window. It becomes an interactive screen where it is easy to open hyperlinks to all times, spaces, keep transforming identity, which will be different at any stopped moment of now. Mikonytė shows the transference of photography as the dominating cultural form to the screen, which has its own ontology. And to conclude, we can say about women's time, after having read these two installations, that in both the cyclical time of reproduction, traditionally related to women, turns into the linear time of narrative and monumental time of history. We can see that installation she or is as a space where transformation of woman is occurring when she starts growing the other, but we also can interpret this as time stopped by the anxiety over the unknown. And playing with science is a ground on which contexts forming identity can be connected, mixed and rejected, but also as an interval of time for growing up. The time of growing as well as of pregnancy is marked by splits in the subject and appropriations of the other, while constantly creating a fantasy of oneself as a totality. And the act of creation is related to the opening of becoming, the dislocating of certainties by using freely interpreted iconographic science of art history. The identity of the subject is fluid and nomadic in both works, migrating and able to be opposed to the roles imposed by patriarchal culture, as well as to the concept of the woman as creator, as a tool to prolong the human race. She is a creator who can and must raise fundamental existential questions, thus create monumental time. Thanks for listening to this long talk.